Good evening, Range of Beauties, and welcome to the Pink Politics Show. Ever since the day after the presidential election of 2016, the Democrats and their allies and the left-wing mainstream media have been trying to devise a plan to win back the presidency. They're annoyed and outraged that the Democratic agenda has been thoroughly disrupted. Prior to the 2016 election, the Democrats' radical anti-Black American women agenda was in full bloom. Waves of immigrants, both legal and illegal, were pouring into the United States unquestioned. Wars that were not in the interest of Black American women's community were being fought in the Middle East with impunity. Trade deals that favored Mexico, China, and everyone else but Black American women's communities were being made. As a result, Black American women were disrespected and at times viciously assaulted by the very immigrants that the Democrats invited into their country. Black American women veterans had a difficult time readjusting to civilian life after risking their lives in pointless Middle Eastern wars. And predominantly Black American cities like Flint and Detroit became cash-strapped overnight, while Mexican towns began to boom and China rose to become today's global economic powerhouse. But pro-immigration, interventionist wars, and deliberately bad trade deals had been removed from the Democratic and Republican-approved agenda once Democratic stooge Hillary Clinton lost the election. For almost 3 years, Democrats and most Republicans, believe it or not, have been living in a nightmare. What they want is, quote, a return to normalcy, which of course for them is uncontrolled immigration, foreign interventionist wars in the Middle East, and one-sided trade deals that benefit foreign countries. The politician who they think is most electable, 2020 presidential candidate Joe Biden, has made the leaders of his party's wishes the central theme of his campaign. Joe Biden's 2020 message is return to normal. Essentially, Joe Biden is fighting to reinstate the anti-Black American woman Democratic agenda. Democrats do not want to make a compromise. They do not want to listen to Black American women's side in this dispute. Democrats instead want the presidency back. 2020 Democrats are going to need Black American women's votes to accomplish that. And in order to get Black American women's votes, the Democratic presidential nominee is going to have to promise and deliver on a reparations package and a Black agenda, which includes restricting legal immigration, distributing small business administration loans to Black American businesses, and making the affirmative action program only and specifically for Black American women's community. Now, more than likely, none of the 2020 Democrats will promise and deliver on any of these things, because if they do, then that would just contradict Biden's message of return to normalcy. And we all know that normalcy means not talking about or doing anything for Black American women's community. So instead of proposing a reparations package and a Black agenda, which includes the 3 items formerly listed to win back the presidency, Democratic leaders Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have decided to announce that they're moving forward with an official impeachment inquiry. Here's a clip of Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi making an announcement.
And we proceeded with balance and caution as we wrote the laws. I can say with authority the Trump administration's actions undermine both our national security and our intelligence and our protections of the whistleblowers, more than both.
Actions undermine both our national security and our intelligence. Well, I'm sure the thought of Democrats undermining Nancy never occurred to her. But immigrants and their actions undermine both your economic and political power. Democrats like Pelosi bring poor and desperate immigrants into the United States, many of whom are illegal. These immigrants drive down wages for blue-collar workers nationwide in Black American women's community. They also take away jobs. According to the Los Angeles Times, the labor force participation rate for Black American men who live alongside Black American women has declined steadily since the passage of the 1965 Immigration Act. That act, by the way, was introduced in the House of Representatives by Democratic Congressman Emanuel Seller of New York and signed into law by Democratic President Lyndon Johnson. And not only that, immigrants voting in U.S. elections devalues and diminishes the voting power of individuals in Black American women's community. Now, CNN and MSNBC never call out the Democrats for undermining Black American women's community. However, both liberal networks will give this impeachment proceeding extensive coverage. These two cable news networks are an extension of the Democratic Party, so it shouldn't surprise any of us after all. Furthermore, Pelosi and the 2020 Democrats need to understand that impeachment is not a policy. And despite what liberal publications like the New York Times and the Washington Post have to say, defeating Trump is not the most important thing for Black American women's community. Reparations is the most important issue for Black American women's community. And reparations, of course, is followed by a Black agenda. ADOS founders Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore hosted the very first ADOS conference on October 4th and 5th at Simmons College of Kentucky. 2020 Democratic presidential hopeful Marianne Williamson was in attendance. None of the other 2020 Democratic presidential candidates were present at the political and economic event as far as we know. That could cost the Democrats the presidency in the 2020 general election. These two young Black Americans are definitely the voice of not just this generation, but Black America at large. They articulate with waxing clarity and penetrating insight what individuals from Black American women's community want politically, socially, and economically. Not attending this event was tantamount to political self-sabotage. The 2020 Democrats must stop pretending like they don't know that organizations like She the People, the NAACP, the National Urban League, and the Congressional Black Caucus no longer represent or reflect the sensibilities of Black American women's community. Now, Yvette Carnell, Antonio Moore, and their ADOS movement and supporters do. Any Democratic presidential candidate who really wants to win should have went to this event and listened closely. Failure of the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates to attend this event will almost certainly guarantee the re-election of the Democrats and, to a lesser extent, the Republicans' worst nightmare. Thank you for joining us. I'm Taylor Washington, and this is Pink Politics, where Black womanhood and politics converge.